My name's Eli Delaney, and I have the honor of meeting some pretty cool people. These are the entrepreneurs, the artists, the creatives, the game changers that are making a positive impact in the people that they meet. And I'm a firm believer that the people that you meet can get you anywhere you want to go. And this show is my way of sharing them with you. It's my way of also helping you be cool people. All right, welcome back to another show, everybody. Eli here, and today's guest is Don Oehlert. So he and I met through Success Champions. A lot of my guests are coming from Success Champions because that's what I do for getting a lot of business in the door and also just making some great business connections. It's a great organization. And by the way, if you're interested in checking it out, let me know. But Don and I had a great introduction. It was probably even close to a year ago. And then all of a sudden it popped back in from another friend of mine, another guest, as a matter of fact. Camille had actually reached out and she said, hey, you guys need to talk. And I'm like, hey, we did talk, but that was a long time ago. So we need to catch it back up. And of course, he and I have hit it off, had a great time. So I wanted to bring him on the show here. So let me tell you a little bit about Don. Don is 20 years in the job search arena. He is the author of Executive's Guide to Job Search. He's a managing partner of eCareerCoaching.com. And he helps small businesses with 2 to 20 employees determine their culture and coaches their leaders on how to sculpt that culture. His approach to fractional chief people officer is based on personality assessment tools and interpretations, which if you haven't done the personality test, you definitely need to, because that's some pretty powerful stuff. And just a little side note, he threw this in there, so I'm going to put it in there just for fun. He makes wooden pens as a hobby. So with that said, Don, thanks for coming and hanging out today, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Eli. I've been looking forward to this ever since we talked about it. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about, let's start with, how did you get connected with SCN? I kind of want to start with that one because that's how you and I met.
Yeah. About 2.5, 3 years ago, a friend of mine decided to join, and he wanted to start a chapter, and he wanted me to be the chapter mentor. So I said, well, sure. I don't know what that means, but I love to network and talk to people. So I'll jump in, and we had a great time. And then he had to take care of some family members fighting some nasty health issues. So our chapter kind of went away. But I stayed in the group on a national level, and then finally found another chapter home recently.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's very cool.
Yeah.
I know it's a great organization. We'll give him some plugs. I'm sure Donnie will love that he gets to get talked about behind his back and on, on shows like this and stuff like that. So you've been 20 business in the job arena. Tell us a little bit about a little bit more. First off, give me kind of a better explanation of what it is you do and the type of clients that you work with.
Okay. As you mentioned, 20 years and closer to 25 now, believe it or not. I volunteered with a couple of faith-based organizations after I lost my job in 2003, so I could learn how to search for a job in the new millennium. Things had changed since the prior time I'd had to look for a job, so I had to teach myself how to do it. And during that process, I learned how to teach others how to look for a job effectively. I aim at people 45 years old and older, director level and above, because ageism is indefinitely a thing in job search. And your marketing messaging has to be incredibly powerful to overcome the predisposed notions that people will have of how expensive you'll be. But if I'm a $200,000 a year guy, but I solve a $20 million a year problem, not an issue. So I help you find out how to speak about yourself. The other side of the coin is I do personality profiling for small to medium-sized companies, 2 to 20 employees, as you mentioned, to help them figure out what their culture is, because most of them have it by default rather than by design. So I want to help them concretize their thinking and then make a stronger culture as a foundation for their business going forward.
Nice. I love it. And, you said a couple of really important things. I want to make sure that we talk on both of them. Number one is, if somebody's 45 or older going into the job market and figuring out, what's life going to look like, whether they are re-entering or, now they're in that position of finding something new, what are some of the things that they do need to look at right out of the gate to prepare themselves to stand out? Because it is a thing. You gotta look at who am I up against? And a lot of times they are looking for somebody who is starting out, might be less experienced because they think it's going to cost them less money, which we all know at the long run, it usually costs them more because the person doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
But, how do we change that messaging, and what does that look like for somebody? Like, give us an example of somebody that's kind of in that. You don't have to say any names or anything, no specifics, but what are what's a good example of what people need to be thinking about in that situation?
What I usually do during an engagement, early phases of the engagement, is I beat you up terribly to understand your SAR stories. And SAR is an acronym: situation as I found it, action I took, and the result of my action. And because we're in a very fast moving society, shall we say, where we all have the attention span of a gnat, I like to turn those upside down, and I want to hear your results first. Quantified results of the things, the outcomes you've generated over the course of your career that we can then put into a powerful marketing message for your skill set, and you can go forth and communicate in that manner. Rather than trying to sell yourself and your set of skills onto someone, market yourself correctly so they're asking you. People hate to be sold, but everyone likes to buy. So I try to get my clients to get into that. You may want to buy this situation. And a lot of it has to go with that quantifications that I talked about earlier. One gentleman found a $39 part on a car manufacturing line, one of the big three, was holding up the sale of a car for conceivably 6 weeks. Cars are about $45,000 average selling price at the time, this couple, 3 years back. And if they could sell hundreds of thousands of those cars globally, his contribution was in the billions. And all he figured is he was doing his job to help that third party manufacturer make better valances under the front bumper so they could continue to manufacture cars. But when we quantified it, it was huge. And that was something that really got him, well, it got him a promotion and a very large raise, which is what he was after. Excuse me.
That is awesome. And I love that because reality is it is marketing. We're all marketing ourselves, no matter what our position is, whether it's our business like you and I, or somebody who's looking at getting a position someplace else. We are marketing ourselves. And those types of case studies, which is great because I love using case study examples, not just testimonials, but case studies. Here's the problem. Here's what we did to solve the problem. Here were the results. And I think that that's a great way to repackage the language, because I know a lot of people that are like, I've seen people that are job seekers, and I've even met people recently that are they're in transition of trying to figure out what their next job is. And I'm meeting them. And a lot of times it's very much that stereotypical, this is what I do and this is what I want to get paid. There's nothing else more to it. So I like your approach to that, to really add some content, add some real meat to how you present yourself, which I think is pretty powerful. I want to talk a little bit about the assessments. Actually, I want to talk a lot about the assessments, because I know that that's a big piece of what you're doing. And I know it's become a really big thing in a lot of businesses now anyway, which is great now that it's been there, because I've known about different personality profiles and stuff like that for 20 years, probably even longer. But it's now becoming much more mainstream, and businesses are actually even using it as a tool to not just figure out your personality. Is like, okay, how do I, what kind of person are you going to be? And do I like that person? But now they're like, okay, how do we change how we communicate with our people? And so I love that you're integrating a lot of that in. Tell us more about that process.
Yes, thank you. The software that I've licensed gives me the ability to test you on 6 different personality profiling assessments. The way I look at it is that DISC is my anchor assessment tool, if you will, but also there's the Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs, there's, the Big Five, or some people know it as Ocean. There's strengths assessment and values assessment. So DISC being the diamond, and the other five are facets of that diamond. It tells me who you are professionally, personally, and even spiritually to a degree, so that I can then help people understand How does a D talk to, oh gosh, a C, for instance? Normally they would be warring factions because D's are, we're going to go to Toledo, and the C's want to know, we're going to drive, we're going to fly, we're going to take the bus, we're going to hitchhike, we're going to Uber, whatever. Where are we going to stay? What are we going to eat? All of those details. And the D doesn't care about any of those details. I'm sorry, C's sometimes their blind spots would be they don't really understand all of that detail drives the D nuts. So they will butt heads normally. But if I can explain how each other receives and sends communications, they can kind of come closer to the middle and be more empathetic, passionate with each other. And I don't mean that from any not safe for work type of comment, but they can be a little bit more empathetic. They can be a little bit more professional. They can be more courteous. And that's really my goal in my little corner of the world is I want to increase that empathy and that courtesy between two people trying to have a conversation that would normally not get along at all.
Right. And it's great that you can do that. And one of the things I've always found is that, as a leader in any situation, quite honestly, is learning those personality profiles, how they think, how they act, what their emotions are like with it, also helps determine where that person might be a better fit. So one of the things that I think is really good, and I know a lot of people are starting to move this direction where not only is like, okay, well, you might, you're applying for this job because that's what happens to be open, but you actually be a better fit over here. And ultimately they end up just moving the chairs around, and everybody ends up being in a happier place with it. So I love the way that kind of stuff is. And it's so funny, when I first learned about like the disc process itself, I actually learned where I stood. I tend to be a lot of a chameleon. So I am definitely I'm actually a very strong SC. And so with that, for anybody who doesn't know, that's analytical. And I like to say analytical and warm and fuzzies. That's pretty much the S and the C's in a nutshell. And for
Yes.
D's is the dominant. They're the alphas. They're the drivers, and the I's are the partiers. Okay, they're usually great salespeople. So that's how I describe them all. They're the dominants, the partiers, the intellectuals, and the warm and fuzzies. That's how I've always described them. And when I learned that from a coaching program years ago. I mean, it was probably 15 years ago. And when I got that, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool, because now I understand this and I can understand these people a bit better. But also, I also understood that I confused people because I tend to be a bit of a chameleon, and I can bounce between the areas, even though it's not my natural state. And so like my coach went to put me in one category, and I was like, that's not me. And she was like, well, yeah, it is. And I was like, no. And eventually I finally got it through my head. That's the persona that I was putting out there. And that's what she saw. And so learning about yourself with this stuff is fascinating. And so that's why I love that you're doing this. Now, give me a good example of somebody that you have worked with in this situation where, like, I mean, when somebody comes to you, especially, actually, here's a better question. Have you had somebody come to you that is a bit of the older generation that hasn't done the personality test, and what did that look like?
Definitely, because as I mentioned, most of my clients are 45 years and older, so 45 years old and older. So, by all means, they've kind of gone off of their "this is the way I've always done it" approach, and that can be good and bad. Because as we all know, there are different stages of memory and different stages of the way the neurons fire in the brain and the way you can put information to use, the way you communicate information. So you find out what didn't work in the past, you find out what should work today. But not the same messaging will work for all people. You talk to any learning and development person, a professional, they'll tell you that some people learn by seeing, some people learn by reading, some people learn by having a conversation, some people learn, different ways for different folks. How do you appeal to all of them in your organization to make sure all the dogs on the mushing team are pulling in the same direction? If they're not, you don't have a very good chance of winning the Iditarod, right? I mean, it's a kind of a requirement, and small companies really can't afford a chief people officer to that extent because they don't have enough need for a chief people officer or even HR director for that matter. So if they look to a person like myself, and not just me, but someone that does what I do, they can bring us in on an ad hoc basis as needed. We can always be there to help them figure out what they've got. How do you want to buttress it? And then check in with people for ongoing situation to make sure that the messaging that they've learned sticks. Because training is an event, but education is a process. And that just takes constant reinforcement, or consistent reinforcement is probably a better way to put that.
Now, very true. Now, that actually brings up a really good question is, so if somebody is, from an individual standpoint, if I were to, like, I mean, I recommend it a lot anyway, but let's say as an individual, what are some of the first steps somebody should be looking at as far as if they want to get into the personality profiling stuff, so they understand it? Where should they start?
Personality profiling is very introspective. It's an introspective process from the word go. So if you've ever noticed that you fight with your wife at the end of the day, or your husband, or your best friend, or whatever, your significant other, your partner, why? When you find out that probably what started that was, oh gosh, you don't like that much salt in your spaghetti. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. And you just say, why did we get into a big fight over salt in a spaghetti? Well, you probably ought to take it that next step and figure out scientifically, because these things have been proven to work. DISC is about 80 years old, by the way, so it's been around a while. It's been proven. Myers-Briggs, another one, been around for a long time. Figure out how that could possibly help your personal relationships as well as your professional relationships. So just sit back and go, Or if you're offended at the store, and the guy that's at the cash register, the one who's supposed to be helping you find whatever it is you're looking for, you think he's being rude. 99.9% of all people on the planet only want to help each other at some level, some way. But without all these preconceived biases, without all of these things that we would just go into, step back, take a breath, and think about it. Consider the source. Probably just somebody trying to help you in their own way. And they think they're being helpful. Like the guy I was telling you about all the details of going to Toledo. He thinks he's being helpful, but the D just wants to get to Toledo. Damn it. Pardon my French. So don't bore me with all that detail stuff. So just, yeah, it's one of those introspective things.
Right. No, and that's good. I'm glad you went into details on that, because that is a big piece that I think that it's really powerful for everybody to do that. And the great thing is, not only once you understand, you go through this process and you learn the stuff about yourself, it also makes it easier for you to understand other people. And this is communication across the board. Like, I use this as a speaker, as a great example. It's like, as a speaker, I know the different personality types. So when I'm doing a presentation, I'm interjecting pieces to appeal to each of the styles, and sometimes more one, sometimes more another one. But I know how to, for lack of a better term, as a speaker term, is work the room. It's like, you got to know who the people are in the room and how are they going to understand and comprehend the stuff you're sharing with them. And in a job placement situation, I could totally see how this would make working with coworkers a lot better. So, my recommendation is, for everybody listening to this, talk to Don, go through and do the test, because you're going to learn more about yourself and the people around you, which means you're going to be a better coworker in that situation. Wouldn't you agree with that, Don?
Exactly that. And I've got one friend who, in her company, she actually puts their DISC profile initial, or not initial, but the color. I mean, DISC is, red, green, yellow, blue, red, green, yellow, and blue. And she has that on their nameplates, on their desks, and on their doors. So if I'm an I, which I am, and I'm walking down the hallway to go talk to somebody who turns out to be an S, but that person has their headphones on and they're typing away. Say they're a programmer, for instance, and I want to talk about the Bears, something. If I walk in and I'm walking down the hall and I see that, and I go, ooh, he is a C or he's an S, whichever one. I'll turn around and leave, and I got to go find that guy at lunch or at the coffee break, because I shouldn't interrupt him. He will think I'm obnoxious. So she heads off the possibility of conflict before it can even happen, because now I know who I am. I know who he or she is. I know not to interrupt them, and vice versa. I'm an I. You can interrupt me all day long. I love talking to people. So whatever, bring it on. So people would know that they could interrupt me at any time. So yeah, that's where it's valuable usage there, to your point before.
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, I'm going to go to my next question here with this, because we talked about from the employee standpoint or individual standpoint, a lot of small businesses they think that, like, they may not be ready for you yet. And most of them are probably more ready for you than they realize. But let's give a little bit on what should they be thinking about as an employer trying to make the best environment to obviously make sure all their employees are getting along. They're all doing their job. They're doing the job that they should be doing because they're in the right position. And you've got all that stuff that is making a successful business rocking and rolling. I know personality profiles are a big piece of that. In order to help them, what are some of the things that they should be looking at, especially if somebody's a small, maybe they do only have one or two employees, or they're getting ready to have one or two employees. Where would you suggest people start with that?
Think about, again, introspectively, what do you want your culture to look like inside your company? Do you want it to be very buttoned down and you got a badge out to go get a cup of coffee, or badge out to use the restroom, or whatever? Or do you want to be, hey, you get your stuff done. I don't care when you come in or when you leave. I don't care when you work. It just depends. What is your goal? What do you think will be the most effective use of your product or service, and what type of person would be best suited to help you grow that and scale that? One of the things that I've noticed since I started the company was in a D or a C, for instance, doesn't necessarily know how to write job descriptions for people in the other three quadrants. Not because they're stupid, they just don't know because they've never had to do it. We all think about things the way we think about them, and we think everybody else thinks like us. I was talking to one guy a couple of weeks ago who has told me that a good friend of his fired his entire staff, multi-million-dollar company, twice in the last 5 years. Twice. Because they just don't get it. It's like he's a D, and their other folks are the other three in the other three quadrants. Well, you've got to think about things. How do you communicate with the people in the other quadrants effectively to keep that dog, like I mentioned before, keep that dog sled going in the same direction without firing and then having to spend all that money to rehire an entire staff again? A $20 million company. $20 million. Can you imagine how many people he got? I think it was 50. So he fired 49 twice in the last 5 years.
And that goes
common denominator.
Yeah, that goes back to my last statement that as an individual, you should be going through those tests and also reading the stuff so you understand other people, because that's pretty obvious where the problem was with that. It's not necessarily everybody, which it always could be, but for the most part, probably not. And I think that that's where, like, businesses, like, would you recommend somebody like have all their employees do the personality test, like, right out of the gate, before they even hire them? I mean, when's a good time for me as the boss to learn this stuff about a potential either existing or upcoming employee?
Excellent question, Eli. The truth of the matter is, SHRM will tell you. SHRM is the Society for Human Resources Management. That's the major association. Up to 75% of all people lie on their resumes at some level about something. Maybe small, maybe big, maybe doesn't impact how I want you to do the job I want you to do for me, but it might. So what a personality profile assessment can do is help kind of weed out those folks that are lying a lot and get them a lot closer to the type of person you want on your staff. So yes, I would definitely have people do personality assessments before I hire them. And my company also does background checks as part of that. So it's all included, if you will, in one basic session. The interpretation of those outcomes, or the results of those assessments, is incredibly important as well. Because to your point earlier, I also talk about how you can use this information, not just having it, but how do you use it? As I was talking about the one friend with the different colored nameplates and so on. In fact, on my own, I have on my own name badge, I have my Enneagram, my DISC, and my Myers-Briggs personality profile assessment results. And again, it just gives you a leg up on what could be inside your company, what could be powerful inside, well, will be powerful inside your company when you know how to talk to people the way they want to be talked to, and rewarded, by the way, and recognized. Big part of employee retention is recognition. If you recognize a D or an I up on stage at the annual sales conference, they're going to love it. Take an S or a C, they'd rather have a dinner certificate or a gift certificate to their favorite restaurant to take their wife, or just you take them out as the boss, because they're more low key, more introverted. So once you understand that, you can get people to stay longer, which is saves you money.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that. And it's so funny because so many people they haven't gotten into this at all. And for me, that's weird because I've been into it for so many years. I love that I'm seeing it enter more in the workspace now, because it used to not, nobody believed in it at all, let alone they thought it was witchcraft, right? So nowadays it's becoming much more mainstream, and, corporations are figuring this out. And I think that it's a really powerful tool to use to look at, your salespeople, even somebody who's using a virtual assistant. Like, just out of curiosity, have you worked with anybody who uses virtual assistants and they've helped you, or had you kind of help them with that?
Yeah, VAs, same thing. You want to have them to make sure they've got the drive to do things the way you want them done. You, with someone else in the other three quadrants, by the way, I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but if they're in another quadrant on the DISC pie, for instance, they'll be able to talk to your customer base that are also in that pie, because that's the way they're naturally wired. And again, personality assessment tools don't try to show you which one is better than any other. None of us are any better than the other. We're all the same. We just communicate differently and are wired differently. What do we do? What do we act like under stress? What do we act like in positive stress or negative stress? So that, again, is the whole secret sauce behind personality profile assessments and interpretation sessions. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure, Eli.
No, it does. It's for me, it's like, I personally think that everybody should. If you're hiring somebody in any capacity, that's a good idea. I come from the coaching and speaking world. I know coaches that have their clients take the test because they want to know how to communicate with that client better. And that also tells them what kind of personality they're going to be dealing with when they're trying to coach the person. So it's such powerful stuff. And I love the way that you've gone about it. And we just kind of did the top level of talking about DISC, but you're dealing, what did you say, 5 different profiles? 6? Okay. So that is, you're really going into some deep dive stuff. And that's a cool thing too, is not one test isn't going to give you all the answers. Like, each one kind of has their specialty. And I've taken multiple tests in multiple areas. And I know over the years, it's taught me a lot about myself, which is pretty slick.
Yeah, they really do. And as I mentioned, DISC and Myers-Briggs are kind of focused on their professional life. Enneagram is more on the personal life, and the strengths and values assessments are your spirit, right? Are you honest? Do you have high integrity? All of those kinds of values, they'll come out. I don't see the questions that the client is asked, and I don't see their answers. So I always say, hey, look, don't try to please me with your answers, or don't try to game the system, because you're cheating yourself. You're not going to get the full value out of the assessment if you do that. So yeah, it's follow the rules, and
very
it's
cool.
like anything.
All right.
Use it right.
Well, we are getting close to time here. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think we should talk about before we start wrapping up?
Oh my. Yeah, I agree with you entirely, Eli. Everybody should do this, even if you don't do it with me. Again, I'm not trying to be a pushy sales guy here, but it really does. It impacted my marriage positively. I did work with another gentleman who was an I, like me, and his wife is an S, and he said they started getting along better because now he understood how she liked to be talked to. So think about it. And really, if you can afford it, do it. Do it. It helps in all areas of your life.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Okay. So, second to the last question, I ask all my guests this question. And because this is the Meet Cool People show, I would love to hear your words. What does Meet Cool People mean to you?
I don't know who said this, so I can't attribute it necessarily, but I love it. Every man or woman knows something I do not, and from them I can learn. The minute you stop learning is the minute you start dying, in my opinion. So meeting cool people that know things I don't know, meeting cool people that do things I've never done or have done and don't want to do again, but would like to just understand their experience better. So people are cool by definition, just because of the fact they're walking around. They're cool. And so I love to, I've been networking for 40 years and intend to continue doing that until I can no longer speak.
It's awesome. I love it. And what's funny is that some of what you said is very similar to a lot of other guests who've talked about, getting to know other people and how everybody's experiences are different. So I love that because that is a way we're always learning from other people. And even if it has something that has nothing to do with anything we would expect, there's still going to be some gold nuggets in it. So I love that kind of stuff. So,
Yep.
Don, this has been a lot of fun, a lot of blast. I mean, I knew it was going to be because, we've had multiple conversations a year apart, and every time it's always been a good show. So,
Yes.
people want to follow up with you. They want to get to know you, maybe actually hire you to help them, go through the whole testing process, even on an individual basis. I'm sure you could probably help them out with that or at least point them in the right direction. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Email is probably the best because if I'm on my phone or if I'm sitting at my desk in front of my computer, I'll get your email. My email address is don@ecareercoaching.com. And, we'll talk. I'll try to figure out a way to get you taken care of.
Awesome. I love it, my friend. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Eli. You're right. This has been a lot of fun. Enjoy catching up with you again.
Very cool. Awesome. All right, everybody get out there. Have an amazing week. As always, you know this drill. If there's anything I can do to help you out, reach out. Let me know. Take care. And that wraps up another Meet Cool People show. Now, if you like what you heard, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, or review so I can help introduce these amazing cool people to even more amazing cool people. And just remember, meeting cool people is just the beginning. You need to have a system in place to follow up with the amazing people that you meet. This is exactly what we do for our clients. If you'd like to see if my team and I can help you, go to followuprockstar.com and check out the case study video to see exactly how we're helping our clients turn casual connections into cash clients for life. Again, go to followuprockstar.com and we'll see how we can work together to turn you into a follow-up rockstar.